This is a podfic of Tony Did Not Anticipate This, written by Spidergirl1809 on Ao3, read by Ao3. Chapter 4. Steve Rogers Saves the Day. Fair warning for this chapter, there is a warning for graphic violence and blood. A high-pitched signal rippled across the town. Every light in the area fell dark. When the wave hit Tony, his suit shut off too. So did Sam and Rhodey's. Luckily, no one was high enough for it to be a problem, but Peter. Tony hit the ground. The clang of his suit rang sharp, and the impact sent a shockwave through his body. When he reoriented himself, everything was down. His HUD was blank. Friday? No response. Anyone hear me? Anyone still on comms? Nothing. His comms went down in the pulse too. He was alone, trapped in a giant metal husk. Fuck! Luckily, Tony installed an emergency escape on his suit, a lever in his right hand that would open it if the power ran out. He tugged on the lever, but nothing happened. His crash landing must have jammed it then. Fuck, he said out loud this time. Peter found Tim. He was facing him right now with no backup. Sure, the kid could bench press a semi-truck, and he was more cunning than Tony sometimes gave him credit for, but he was still a kid. And right now, Tony couldn't do anything to protect him. Footsteps approached. Tony tensed, but he was helpless. Dread settled like a weight on his already stiff limbs. Stark, Sam said, muffled through Tony's helmet. Stark, you with me? Tony closed his eyes, relieved. Please, tell me someone's got eyes on Spider-Man. No one's got eyes on anything right now, man. Then get me out of this thing! I'm working on it. I need to get us under cover. There are drones everywhere. A new, sinking thought occurred. Where's Rhodes? His tech would be down too. Even if he broke out of his suit, he couldn't easily escape danger without his prosthetics. Taken care of, Sam said. Good. Sam grabbed the feet of Tony's suit. Metal squealed across asphalt as he dragged him. As humiliating as it was, at least it allowed Tony to hold on to his grudge for a few more moments. If he didn't do that, then he'd have to be grateful for Sam. Tony refused to do that. The screeching stopped. How do I get this suit off you? Without his lever mechanism, Tony didn't actually know. Maybe a crowbar? Peter fell to his knees. His nose and throat burned. His eyes stung. Every inhale was heavy and wet. The agony of it almost drowned out the pain in his ears. Almost. The fidget cube enclosed around him and Tim, creating a bare metal room. Behind him, he could sense Tim reforming, turning back from a cloud of green gas into a man. What did you do? Tim snarled. I wouldn't turn into gas again if I were you. Peter hardly had enough air to get the words out. Because then we'll both die. Beneath his gas mask and melodramatic black cloak, the storm clouds in Tim's eyes darkened. What did you do? Peter leaned on the wall and struggled to his feet. His ears were ringing again. At least he could hear this time. He still had Tim's utility belt in his hand, too. He gripped it tighter. Mr. Stark designed this place to neutralize your poison, aka you, apparently. The process is toxic and removes oxygen from the room. We'll both die. Tim didn't look bothered by this information. If anything, the storm in his face calmed. He tilted his head to the side in an appraising way that raised Peter's already blaring spider sense. My drones will still destroy this little blight of a town. I have my contingencies. Turn off the drones then, he said. Or tell me how to. The controls were probably somewhere on the belt he held. Unfortunately, Peter didn't look very threatening right now, half slumped against the wall, so Tim ignored him. My gas should have killed you. Why didn't it? To be fair, Peter didn't feel great. He felt like throwing up a lung, or fainting, or both. "I'm part spider," Peter settled with. Mr. Stark upgraded Peter's gas filters, so that helped too. "That doesn't make sense." "You got bit by a radioactive cloud, I got bit by a radioactive spider. Life doesn't make sense, Timothy." "None of that made sense either." Peter groaned. "Just help me turn off the drones so we can go home. Maybe they'll even reduce your prison sentence for being marginally less evil than you originally intended to be." "How fascinating that you still have the stamina to be irritating." "I always have the stamina to be irritating." That's when Peter's body went with the throwing up a lung option. He crumpled to the ground, wheezing. He pawed at the seams of his mask, the fabric so much thicker than before, so much more oppressive. "Tisk, tisk," Tim tutted. "My gas seems to be catching up with you, little boy. Let me help." He kicked Peter in the rib cage, ripping the wind from his body. Tim's utility belt skidded across the floor. Peter tried to wriggle toward it, but Tim kicked him again. He barely felt it. He was too focused on getting oxygen. Half conscious, Peter tugged his mask off. That was a poor choice. It didn't even help him breathe better. Spots danced in his vision. Tim gripped his bicep and hauled Peter to his feet. He slammed him against the wall. "You're younger than I thought." Peter was awful at keeping this secret identity thing. Tim pulled his own mask off. "There, now we can see each other before we die." "What?" The image would haunt Peter for years. Tim's face, pale and ashen, his grey hair wild, and his grin, his Cheshire cat grin that grew as his body faded into green gas until Tim's cruel teeth were the last of him Peter saw. "No, wait!" A fog of white fell from the ceiling. The decontamination process. It collided with Tim's gas cloud, and he exploded. Flecks of garish crimson sprayed across the room. Infinitesimally small, no bigger than dust. Peter curled on himself to avoid being hit by what was left of Tim. There was no avoiding it. It flew everywhere. Peter gagged and fell to the ground for the umpteenth time that day. The air was as viscous and wet as concrete now, solidifying fast, settling like a crust in his lungs. He would die here. He'd just killed a man, and now he would die here too. He tried to crawl toward the belt, but he only made it a few inches before his limbs gave out. That's when Peter noticed the best thing he'd ever seen, a wall-mounted radio. Mr. Stark must have installed it in case someone got trapped inside. He pushed the button. His clumsy fingers smeared it with the red streaks of Tim, but he pushed it. He hoped the radio worked, even with Tim's tech blast. Maybe the walls of the cube would have protected it from the EMP. "Mr. Stark?" Nothing. "Someone, please come in." His own voice felt far away. Was he crying? "Mr. Stark, someone answer me." Still nothing. "Please." Finally, a reply. "Peter," Captain America said. "Is that you?" Steve launched his shield at a row of drones. It smashed through them and ricocheted off a building back into his arms. Another one flew behind him and he sent his fist through its beady head. He didn't rely on technology much in battle, so at first he didn't notice anything amiss. Not until he spotted Natasha waving frantically from the rooftop. He tried to radio to ask what was up, only to realize her comms were down and every single light had shut off, leaving the town illuminated by only the dim setting sun. "Oh no," Steve said. He rolled and ducked behind his shield to escape a volley of bullets. True, he didn't rely on technology much in battle. That didn't mean he wouldn't need it today. When he realized Tim could wipe out their equipment, he'd stopped to secure his comms, along with anything designed for dealing with gas, to the back of his shield. He figured vibranium should be able to block out an EMP. Thank God he was right about that. Stuck? Someone answer me! Peter pleaded, hearing somebody usually so full of life sound petrified and small. Steve had to stop and get his bearings. Please.
Peter, is that you?
Captain America?
Where are you? What's going on?
Tim's dead. I can't. For a moment, Steve thought the channel was cutting out, but then he realized it was Peter, gasping for air. Dread sunk through his body.
Where are you?
He already knew the answer. He turned towards Natasha on the roof. Somehow she knew exactly what he was asking. She pointed down the street. Steve ran. Sam busted Tony out of the suit. It took about 5 minutes of smashing it with a rock, which Tony really hoped no one caught on camera. But he was out. Now he huddled with Sam and Rhodey behind a tall white sign. An old frontier building protected their back, and the flowering bushes beside them added cover. Sam and Rhodey fired at the drones with comically small pistols as Tony tried to fix their comms. It was all they could do. Without their tech, all three of them were just regular men. Natasha must have gotten in touch with Nick Fury, though. While Sam was smashing Tony with a rock, backup arrived in the form of nondescript armoured vans firing extremely descript rocket launchers. The one-eyed bastard still had his touch. Tony got his comms up and running. Can't breathe. Blood everywhere. It was Peter. Tony's gut lurched. Sam and Rhodey locked eyes with him, frozen in the same cold horror that ran through Tony's veins.
Stay calm. I'm coming,
Steve said. How was his radio still working?
How long has the chamber been up?
Oh no. Peter was locked in his gas decontamination chamber. Depending on when the process started, Peter had about 2 minutes before chemical reactions sucked all the oxygen from the room. Maybe less. Peter didn't answer.
Where is he?
Tony shouted.
Tony?
Steve, where is he?
Corner of Main Street and Charles Avenue.
Mr. Stark. Peter choked. It alerted every protective instinct in him. Sam jerked his head in the direction of Charles Avenue.
Go. I'll stay with Rhodey.
Rhodey nodded.
Be safe. I know you're worried, but remember, you don't have armor. You can't get to him if you're dead.
Sam shoved a pistol into Tony's hands.
Go.
Tony bolted. There was no way he'd be fast enough. Not when he had to dive behind something every 5 seconds because he had no armor. He was closer than Steve, though, who'd been situated on the other side of town when the EMP went off. He crouched behind a dumpster, catching his breath. Only a few blocks to go, but no clear path. The drones were only getting more aggressive. The ground shook as one of Nick Fury's men fired another rocket launcher at the drones. Tony covered his ears and braced for the shockwave. Peter hugged his body around the radio. Every inhale gurgled like gravel. Darkness edged in around him. He could taste blood in his exhale. When? He couldn't even get the question out.
Longer than expected, Captain America said.
Gunfire rumbled, the reverberating clatter of it against vibranium.
Just hold on.
Peter didn't know how much longer he could hold on. The world had turned red, and not because of the layer of Tim dust coating the room. I'm almost there, Mr. Stark added. I can see you right now. That's good, Peter whispered, and with a final exhale, the world slipped away. Tony spotted the chamber, a gunmetal box standing stark against the rustic panelled building beside it. He army-crawled towards it. Steve's shield flew around in the distance, keeping the drones distracted. When he arrived, an intimidating door greeted him. Tony knew it'd be sealed until the decontamination process was complete. Before the mission, the whole team agreed. If someone got stuck inside, the process had to finish. Letting the gas out could kill innocent people. Peter never agreed to that. If he'd known about it, he definitely would have. But he didn't. Tony never agreed to Peter being in there either. Peter! He tried to find a footing for his fingers, but there was nothing to grip on the door, no way to open it. Please tell me you're still alive. Nothing. No answer. He crouched to get under the door, but still nowhere to find purchase. Come on, kid, give me something to work with here. A noise? Anything? Silence. Painful, excruciating silence. Kid! He slammed a palm into the door. Kid! The control panel. He'd installed one on the outside, just in case. Tony ran to the far side. A table of buttons and knobs sat mounted on the wall. Process 95% complete, a gauge said. Tony paused. He remembered what Rhodey told him earlier. People were counting on the Avengers. A lot of them would die if he opened that door before the process finished. Peter would never be okay with that. Tony hovered over the emergency button. He wanted to press it. He wanted to press it so bad, but he couldn't. He'd never be able to live with himself for it, but he couldn't press that button. He rested his head on the wall. Sorry, Pete. I'm so sorry. The gauge counted up. 97%. Come on, hurry. 98%. Come on. 99.5%. Please. 100%. Tony slammed the button, anticipation thick in his throat. Nothing happened. He jabbed the button again. Still nothing. The EMP hadn't affected the radio inside the chamber, but it still affected the opening mechanism on the outside. Peter! He yelled. Please, say something! No. No, 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 no. He sprinted back towards the door. He tried to force his fingers under its lip. The result was the same as before. It was sealed tight. No, no. He took a few steps back and hurled his body into it. It smashed into his shoulder and rattled his teeth. He wound up and threw himself again. There was no point, but damn it if that meant Tony would stop trying. Dizziness settled in from the effort. He stepped back to fling himself at the door once more. A firm hand blocked him. Tony knew who it was before even looking. Steve, he sighed. Steve didn't say a word, just pushed Tony to the side. He braced his shield and launched himself into the door. It tore like paper. Tony stood petrified as Steve rushed inside. A metallic odor washed over him. Large swaths of the box were splashed with a repugnant layer of powder-fine crimson. Steve carried Peter out. His body dangled lifelessly, his entire chest and neck stained with the powder, lips tinged blue and dotted with even more blood. Is he? Peter coughed, a wet spluttering as he curled himself into Steve's shirt and hacked up a wad of blood and phlegm. Tony's knees almost gave out. For a fraction of a second, Steve's stoic face crumbled too. He flashed through several emotions. Relief, sadness, protectiveness, fear. But then the emotions were gone, replaced by a wall of heroic leader face. Not here, he said. Our position is too vulnerable. Only then did Tony realize he'd stepped forward, reaching for Peter. He dropped his arms to his side. Right. The coolness of Peter's body, the paleness of his skin, and the way he trembled. Steve felt like he was carrying a porcelain doll. Tony tailgated his heels, face stricken with panic. That only served to amplify Steve's unease. They arrived at the employee entrance to a dusty bar. The door was locked, but super strength rendered that a non-issue. Not 21, Peter mumbled as the smell of alcohol washed over them. Steve laughed, an odd shaking sound. Tony also choke-snorted. I wouldn't worry, Underoos. Peter perked up at Tony's voice. Mr. Stark! I'm here. His face turned impossibly gentle, something Steve hadn't seen on him before. He slipped Peter into Tony's arms. The kid nestled in. Steve grabbed Tony and steered them both toward a corner, far from the windows and tucked under the bar. "You're all right," Tony said, lowering Peter to the ground. "You're all right." Steve tugged at the table, using it to barricade the door. Then he dropped to his knees next to Tony and Peter. He pulled a portable oxygen mask, one of Tony's inventions, complete with the antidote to Tim's poison, from where he'd secured it to the back of his shield. The look of shock and gratitude on Tony's face was suffocating. "How did you... It still works? It wasn't hit by the EMP?"
"Vibranium," Steve explained.
He flipped the on switch at the side of the mask and positioned it on Peter's face. Immediately, Peter gasped, chest heaving as he scrambled to cling to the mask. Tony pulled him closer, hunched forward. "It's fine. You're gonna be okay." Steve sat back on his heels. He got the feeling this time that Tony was trying to reassure all three of them. Outside, gunfire rebounded off the walls of the building. A booming volley that set Steve's teeth on edge. "His belts!" Peter seized Tony's shoulder and tried to tug himself upright, but to little avail. "I forgot his belts."
"What?"
Steve said. "The drones!" Tony tensed, his hold on Peter as he continued to struggle. "You're talking nonsense, kid. What does fashion wear have to do with anything?" "We need to turn them off." Oh, wait. Steve understood. When he ran into the metal box, something caught his eye. Beneath the gory mess in the decontamination chamber, a curious leather strip. He dismissed it at the time, primarily focused on getting Peter out. If memory served right, it looked like a belt. A belt that could have the controls for Tim's army on it.
"I'll handle it," he said.
He passed his shield over to Tony.
"Take this."
He couldn't bear the idea of Tony and Peter being defenseless without him here. "What? Why?" He stood.
"You and the kid don't have any armor."
"Neither do you!" Tony called after Steve as he slipped out the door. All of the adrenaline from earlier fled Tony's body. He kept himself tethered to the world by focusing on Peter's fingernails digging into his bicep, on his hair damp with sweat against his chest. If he had the energy, he might have feared for Steve. He might have been irritated that he'd just gone off without explaining anything, that he'd left his one defensive item at Tony's side while he bolted headlong back into battle. But Tony didn't have that energy right now. So he just pulled his knees up and leaned against the wall, Peter tight in his arms and Steve's shield at his side. He rested a hand on Peter's, keeping the oxygen mask in place, and breathed with his kid. Steve returned eventually. His face looked even grimier than before, and a new cut shone on his lip.
"I found it."
"Found what?"
"The belt."
"The belt," Tony repeated numbly. It didn't make any more sense than it did 10 minutes ago. Peter, however, jolted alert. "Tim's utility belt." Steve tossed it over to Tony. Black leather with excessive pockets and hardware.
"See if you can figure out how to shut down the drones. Maybe turn the power back on to get medical help over here. Otherwise, I'll take the kid when there's a safe path."
Inside one of the pockets, Tony discovered what looked like a television remote, but shorter and stockier. Probably the control system. He inspected the buttons, but there wasn't an obvious answer to which button did what. Not on the surface, anyway. Peter moved to help. Tony caught him and held him in place. "Just keep breathing, kid. You've done plenty." "But..." He coughed, spitting more blood onto the plastic. Tony's jaw tightened. This was his fault. Peter shouldn't have been here. Not just today, but ever. He shouldn't have been bitten by that spider, and Tony shouldn't have dragged him into Avengers stuff. He should be at home, playing video games with Ned, surrounded by Legos and decathlon flashcards.
"You need to focus," Steve said. "The sooner we stop this mess, the sooner we can get help."
"Right," Tony swallowed. Because Steve didn't have the skill set to figure out this remote, so this was on him now. He tore the back off and examined the mess of wires and computer boards. Whoever Tim was, he didn't know how to keep his work tidy. Crash! The windows shattered as bullets sprayed. Drones burst through the hole. Tony curled around Peter, who wheezed at the movement, but Steve hauled them both behind himself. Bullets thrashed his shield, held protectively over them.
"Now would be a good time to turn these off, Tony."
He frantically scanned the remote. It only took a few moments to understand what he needed to do. He pulled a few wires out. Drones clattered to the ground. Lights flickered to life. In an instant, the battle was over.